Today is August 19th, 2022. My name is Justin Creech, and this is my father, Elmer Jim Creech. And we're here in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I'm going to ask him a few things about his life. He's a grandfather to many grandchildren and a father to myself and my sister Katie. And he has many brothers and sisters. We're in the eastern North Carolina region, which is where he grew up. So I'm going to just get right to it and ask him some questions and get some good information about the history of the last 80 years of his life. So, Dad, you were born in 1941. Tell us a little bit about the first memories you had as a little boy growing up in eastern North Carolina in the 40s. And speak up so the camera can hear you.
So one of the big things in my life that was joyful was learning to fly airplanes. And one of my first real strong memories of just excitement in my life was laying in the pasture. I was about 6 or 7 years old, and there were many airplanes in the air doing maneuvers related to Stallings Air Force Base in Kinston, North Carolina. That's where they were based, but they were being trained to go to the Korean War. And I had no idea what they were doing up there, except I really enjoyed watching them do what they did. And one of the things that I thought of at that point is that I would love for one of them to come down and let me play with it. And my vision at that point was that it would only be about this big,
Yeah.
not this huge monster that I saw several years later. And that whole idea of flying followed me the rest of my life, and still, if my health would allow it, I would continue to fly.
Right. So growing up in the 40s, and into the 50s, tell us a little bit about what life was like living on a farm, living in North Carolina. What was your family involved in, and how many brothers and sisters did you have, that kind of thing.
So there were 5 kids in the family. Jack was my younger brother. My sister, older than I, was Mary. And there was Harold, that was next below Jackie, and then there was Randy. So there was 4 kids in the family.
Or you were the 5th.
Yeah.
So 5 total.
Yeah, I believe that adds up. And in the early years, I always felt like that we had plenty to eat. And when I say early years, when I was less than 10 years old, I felt like there was always plenty to eat and plenty of money around. And we had very few amenities around the place where we lived. We lived on a farm that was a sharecropper farm, and we didn't own anything. We got to live on the property for farming tobacco and corn, and we did raise some pigs. But the money crop was tobacco. We did make some money off of corn, but we primarily raised the corn to feed the pigs.
Feed the pigs.
Yeah, and so we slaughtered our own pigs, and we sold some of them and ate some of them.
Mm-hmm.
We raised most of the vegetables that we ate because they were expensive at the store, and besides that, they were better, better quality, better for you.
And this was before the days of pesticides.
That's correct.
Did you have any way of preventing bugs from destroying crops, or did you have issues with that at all?
Well, there was a specific insect or worm. That's an insect, I think. It's part of the life of the insect.
Yeah.
Called a hornworm that would eat up the tobacco. And one of the ways that we tried to control that was we actually would go through the tobacco field and pull the worms off and crush their heads and throw them on the
So how many?
literally hours and hours doing that.
Now, did you have multiple kids, or was it just your family, or did you have neighbor friends that would all come get involved in that?
That specific process was just us.
Mhm.
But when we got to the point of harvesting the tobacco, we would trade labor with neighbors.
Mhm.
Other families would come and help us do our, when we primed the tobacco, that's the gathering of the leaves of tobacco.
Mhm.
We would do our field one day, and then we would go to the neighbor's field the next day and do theirs. And normally during the summertime, when we were doing tobacco, we would work at least 6 days a week, all day long, working in tobacco with ours and all the neighbors.
And all the neighbors. So that to me created a concept of neighborhood like no one sees today.
No.
And families close knit. Everybody went to the same church, that type of thing. Everyone went to the same school. Any comments on any of that?
Well, I wouldn't say that everybody went to the same church. Of the groups that we, or the families that we traded with, only 2 of them went to our church, and the other 3 or 4, for the most part, didn't even go to church.
Okay.
And they were kind of different. We
Sure.
felt like they were lost.
Well, we see a lot of that today. That hasn't changed.
Amen. But the feeling in the family was that we were doing good. We felt that life was good.
It wasn't until later that you had something to compare that to
Exactly.
that you realized how poor you really were.
That's right. And from a financial perspective, the biggest financial year that I could remember in the 19 years that I was with the family before I left to join the Air Force, our income after all expenses was about $900
For the year.
for the entire year.
That's amazing to think about comparatively to what we see happening today.
We had no indoor plumbing. If you had to go to the bathroom, you either had to go to the field or the woods, or there may be a toilet nearby.
In the outhouse.
Yeah.
That's what a toilet was.
Yeah. An outhouse, a loo if you were in.
There was no actual ceramic bowl to sit on.
No. We actually built the outhouse, and we had a large hole and a small hole. The small hole was for the kids.
Yeah.
The large hole, and when you got old enough, you could use that.
Right.
You can edit that out if you want to.
Doesn't matter. About how far away did you have to walk sometimes? What was the furthest do you remember?
Well, the toilets had to be far enough away from your water source
Sure.
that you didn't contaminate the water source. So most of our water sources were very near the home,
Mhm.
and in our case, where we lived the longest period, that water source was right next to the house on the back side of the house. And
Was
so
that a well?
It was a well and a hand pump.
And a hand pump.
We had no electricity.
And pails. You carried a pail.
Pails, yeah.
Water pail.
Yeah.
So, tell me about, you used that for cooking, and you also had to use it for bathing too, yeah?
Yes.
So how did that, well, tell me about those two processes, if you remember much.
Well, all of the cooking, especially early on, before 19, I think it was 52 when we got a gas stove. Prior to that, we had a wood stove, and you could bake biscuits and eat, whatever you could do on a gas stove, you could do on the wood stove. But
Didn't manage the fire.
you had to manage the fire. We didn't have any thermostats or anything like that. You
Right.
just had to go on the field.
Go on the field.
Yeah.
But I bet your mom got really good at that.
And she made some of the best biscuits you ever put in your mouth.
I want one right now.
But she would, the routine at like 13 to 15 years old was, mom would make about 48 biscuits in the morning, and that would last us for the entire day. By the end of the day, we would have eaten all 48 biscuits.
With 5 kids and 2
5
adults,
kids,
and
yeah.
probably a neighbor would have 1 or 2.
Well, the neighbors were rarely there
Okay.
to eat. If
'Cause
we got together,
Food was
with the
pretty
na-
scarce, I would imagine.
That's right.
You couldn't really hand it out to all the neighbors too. You wouldn't have any to eat
No.
yourself.
That's right.
Okay.
So when it was time to take a bath once a week,
Once a week.
once a week, especially during the wintertime. During the
Yeah.
summertime, you
A
had
little
to
more
clean up daily because you were in the
Stinking.
field and
Yeah.
stinking, and well, we probably stink all the time.
Sure.
But when it was time to, usually Saturday, maybe Friday, but Saturday was the day we would kind of gather, or especially in the wintertime, we would get a foot tub, which is a pail about this big around and about this tall. You would fill it about half full of water and put it on the stove, the heating stove,
Mhm.
and warm it up. And then all 3 of us boys, the bathing place was in the kitchen,
Yeah.
and we would gather around the stove, and we would all kind of use a washcloth and soak up and
Mhm.
wring it out, and then wipe it off. And
That was it.
that's the way you took a bath.
And you probably had how many pairs of shorts, shoes, underwear,
Well,
t-shirts?
you got 1 pair of shoes per year.
Yeah.
You will usually get it in the fall after you sold the crop and you had a little money to buy. But I had 1 pair of shoes. Later on, I had a second pair that was my Sunday shoes, and I could only wear them for Sunday. But my regular day shoes, I would wear them out by springtime
Sure.
and have to go barefooted most of the summers.
Which was fine. You had tougher feet. And,
Yeah. Oh, they were tough.
Yeah.
Clothing, usually had 2 pair of jeans and maybe 1 pair of pants that was your Sunday go to meeting pants.
Mhm.
Shirts were at most 3, and you had to make those work for the entire week. Mom would do a wash on Wednesday. That was always the washing day, and she would wash and put the clothes on the line, and the sun would dry them, and she would iron and fold and put away.
Now the
or
concept of washing was washboard in a tub type thing.
That's correct. The early was she would we had a big black, what we call the wash pot,
Mhm.
and we would build a fire around it and heat up water.
Yeah.
Because we had no hot water.
Sure.
And that would be the soapy water that you would the washing pot had a paddle, and you would just
Mhm.
almost like chopping them,
And
but
that was
you
the
were
mechanism.
stirring, and that was
Yeah.
the washing process.
Wow.
There was no mechanical.
And she would spend an hour doing that, or 30
like,
minutes. Or,
probably in the range of 30 minutes.
yeah.
And then you would wring out the clothes and put them in clear water, and
Rinse
you
'em.
would have two rinse cycles. You would have two different tubs, and you would rinse out one and put it in the next one, and then wring them out, and then you would put them on the line to dry.
Wow.
That was the washing process. But you only had two pair of jeans, or maybe only one pair of jeans, because the other one you were wearing, and maybe one or two shirts each for the boys, and the clothes for my sister were minimal.
Yeah.
She didn't have very much either. But you could put virtually everything for dad and mom and the kids all in one big wash. The pot was about this big around.
She would probably start that in the morning after y'all ate or went to school.
On washing day, one of the first things that would happen in the morning was dad would fill the, you gotta pump all the water to go in there, and he would build a fire around the washing pot.
That's an all-day process. Because
all day long. It would take all day long to get everything.
Yeah.
And mom would do most of it. We wouldn't do it. We'd be
you
working
couldn't
in
pull
the
up the weather app and look and see if it was going to rain. And
Didn't matter. You had to go.
Yeah.
If it was pouring down, you would have to
wouldn't
wait to start the fire.
Wait to do it the next day or something.
Yeah.
If needed be.
Yeah.
So, now tell me a little bit about the school process, and maybe what would one day of getting up, what time did you get up to go work in the field / go to school / go to football practice? What would one full day look like as you aged? Maybe one in elementary school and one in high school, or one in something along those lines.
Well, early on, when I first started at school, 6, 7 years old, in first and second grade, I didn't do much work in the fields until I got almost 10 years old. But normally we would get up around 7ish. The bus would come right at 8 o'clock, and we would be in school by 8:30.
They had a combustion engine bus?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
In 1948?
1948. They were, I think all of them were made by Dodge at that time.
Wow.
But we would get home between 3 and 3:30. So you would get on the bus, go to school, and that same bus would bring you back, and you would get home about 3:30. And at the age of 6 to 10, if Dad was in the field, actually working, say springtime, he would be plowing or turning the ground to get it ready for the crop year. And many times I would go directly to the field to help him do that. Many times actually walk behind the mule and plow.
Behind the mule and plow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And later on, as I got older, that routine of plowing and working in the field after school, the times were basically, we didn't do the time changes that we do now. We, during the beginning of the year, we would go to school 8, we would be in school at 8 o'clock. But during the winter time, we would wait until 8:30. So they would change that, but we wouldn't change the time. We just
go at 8:30.
Go at 8:30 instead of 8. But as the school year got near the end, there was more and more work to be done in the field. And as I got older and older, as soon as I got off the bus, I was in the field working, either plowing or cultivating or planting, that sort of thing.
Did you ever do work at well before you went to school?
Never,
Never.
no. We just didn't try to get up.
But
The only
your
time-
dad was up.
Well, Dad was usually up and out by 6:30.
Mhm.
During the summertime, when we were priming the tobacco, almost everything started at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
School wasn't involved at that point.
Right. You just worked until
Till you finished or couldn't.
couldn't. And those meals never tasted so good when you came in
Oh,
from the
man.
fields. Grandmama, well, my grandmama, your mama would have meals ready for you,
Yeah.
and y'all would probably come in and take a break and eat 8,
Well,
9ish.
now, Mom, during the priming season, we all worked.
Yeah. Okay.
All of us. Mom didn't stay at the house.
Okay.
We all worked in the tobacco, one way or the other. Either in the field or at the barn when we were stringing the tobacco, put it on the sticks to get it ready for curing.
Mm-hmm.
But we would stop at 11:30, and Mom would have pre-prepared some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
She'd be up at 5 o'clock or 4
Doing
o'clock getting ready. And she would prepare some food, and we would, the other families, almost all of the moms did not work. They were at home and prepared. But Mom worked and would come.
She was
and,
pretty able.
She
She
was
was
a
strong.
able Mabel.
She was strong as an ox too.
She was.
Yeah.
And so we would all go to the house, put the meal together and eat, and be back at 12:30 and go to work again.
Yeah.
And normally we didn't stop until 5 o'clock or thereabouts, if that was the right time. In some cases, until we couldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of the cycles. A cycle means we would prime the tobacco the same day, and then the following week the same day. So our day would probably be Wednesday. Most of the time would be Wednesday. So we would prime the tobacco, put it in the barn, and it take 6 days for it to dry out, and then you would empty the barn the day before you primed again.
Mm.
So that was kind of the cycle of the tobacco, and you had to get it done in the day, otherwise you lose it.
You lose it. Wow. And that's not. You couldn't do that. You just couldn't do it.
But as I said earlier, the big year was about $900.
Mm-hmm.
There were many years it
Didn't quite get there.
you know.
So coming into high school, 14, 15 years old, how did things change when
I
football and baseball?
I played baseball, and during the baseball season, we only practiced one day a week, and normally would have one game a week, because it would take just too much time out of the work cycle.
Sure. It's fine. Does mom need something?
That's okay.
We're good?
Yep.
Alright. I can easily cut that out. So, baseball, one day a week.
One day
game
a week and one game a week.
Did you always have 9-on-9 or?
We did always. There were only 2 schools nearby that had a baseball team that we could actually play.
Mm-hmm.
And they were about 5 or 6 miles from where our school was.
So the coaches would had to have communicated at that point at church or at wherever they saw each other, say, hey, let's get the boys together on, would you play on Friday afternoons, or when was it usually?
No, it
Saturday
was,
mornings?
we actually played during the school hours.
Oh, okay.
We would actually drive over, about 10 or 10:30, and we would actually get out of school to play ball. But it was only one day
Sure.
per week, and we only did that, like, I think we might have had 10 games,
Hmm.
and that was it.
Do you remember if it was a pretty heated rivalry? Like, was the competition pretty stiff, or?
Not really. It was more like just playing.
Mhm.
When I got to be a senior, it got a little bit different.
But that was probably something you really looked forward to and was rather enjoyable comparatively to the rest of your life.
In football, we had a regular league, and we played, I think it was 8 games.
Hmm.
And so one of those days would be, we practiced Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, off Thursday, and played Friday night.
Okay.
And so practice started at 7 o'clock.
So how did you manage all the pads and the laundry related to that? Somebody had to be on top of that.
Well, we had a game
Jersey.
jersey and pants,
Uh-huh.
and we had a practice. And so we did, at the end of the week, or at the end of the practice on Wednesday, we would take all of our practice stuff home, and Mom would clean
Mm.
all that up.
I bet Wednesday was her least favorite day.
Yeah.
Or Thursday morning when she would start that pot.
Yeah. And so that was probably the most enjoyable, playing football. And we had some big rivalries with Wallace Rose Hill. That was two towns got together with their school, and they had more students and usually had one of the best teams. And one of the most memorable games was when I was a junior. We played them to they beat us 13-12, and that was the closest we ever came to beating Wallace Rose Hill.
Mm.
And Johnny Godbowl was the name that, I think he ended up playing for the Redskins.
Football.
Yeah, football. He, I tackled him 2 times in that game, back to back. I was middle linebacker, and I tackled him over the right shoulder on one time, and on the left shoulder the next time, and it I lost memory of the game. Didn't know what the score was at halftime.
Mm-hmm. So you were probably concussed.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I talked to the coach about it, and he said, "Well, you better go to the doctor." And they arranged to get me to the doctor, and I went. Dr. Bowling was his name. Went down to see Dr. Bowling. I knew him. He knew me and the family, and he looked at me and talked to me and asked me a few questions, and he said, "Well, you got knocked cuckoo. You can go back if you want to." I went back and played the rest of the game, and I didn't feel exactly right after that, so I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I got a
Sure.
concuss. But I don't remember there being any difference after that.
Right. You recovered and your brain healed probably within a couple of days.
Yeah. It probably did, or maybe it didn't, and I
Who knows?
lost some of that capability. I don't know.
So that's high school and football. What was the process? How did you get recruited to join the Air Force? What made you decide on the Air Force? And then, what was the process like when you left home?
Well, some of my advisor, a couple of the teachers, were, since I was number 3 in the class of graduating seniors academically. They wanted me to go to school, go to college somewhere, but nobody knew or coached me on how I might be able to go to school. I just accepted the fact there was no money to go to school and decided I had to do something. And I didn't want to continue farming, just not something I wanted to do long term.
Sure.
And I decided I would just check out the Air Force since I enjoyed airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
I thought maybe I would get a chance to fly airplanes. And so I just went to the recruiter and asked about joining up, and we talked about 30 minutes and the decision was made.
You remember that conversation? Kind of?
Kinda, I just remember having the conversation. He was impressed with the fact that I was number 3 in the class and made straight A's, and he was glad to have somebody of that caliber just
Sure.
ask about it.
Yeah.
And so I agreed and said, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
It was all in one day.
So from that point, there had to have been some tears in Mom's eyes when you came home and told her that's what you were going to do. But
Well, she knew I was going to check with the recruiter.
okay. And then from that point, it was 6 months before you left, or 2 months, or
It was not even a month.
oh wow, so it's really quick. Must have been right after you graduated.
Right after I graduated.
Okay.
I graduated like the 25th or 28th of May,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in San Antonio on June 19th.
Wow.
That was quick. So the process of actually getting to the Air Force at San Antonio was kind of comical, kind of sad. They had given me a bus ticket to Raleigh to be flown by Eastern Airlines down to San Antonio, and I caught the bus to Raleigh to get on the airplane, and when I got there, Eastern Airlines had gone on strike, and they were not flying, and so they gave me a bus ticket back home, and that the day that I was supposed to leave was a Friday, and so they said come back on Monday and we'll put you on the train. And so I went on the bus back home and didn't have any way to get all the way home. The bus only went to Warsaw,
Mm-hmm.
which was about 15 miles from the town where I grew up, Beulaville. And so I got off the bus in Warsaw and started walking toward Beulaville. And stuck out my thumb, and two Marines from Camp Lejeune picked me up and took me all the way back to Beulaville.
What kind of car?
I don't remember.
What were the options at that point?
A Ford or a Chevrolet.
Ford or Chevrolet?
Yeah, that's what most was down in that area.
And it was just a sedan type, or
Yeah, just a sedan. But anyway, I got back to Beulaville and had to walk home. It was a mile and a half home,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually almost sprinted home because I just that one day.
You were probably hungry and thirsty and multiple things.
And I wanted to get back home. I was getting worried about what I was doing.
Yeah.
Having second thoughts.
But you were 19, right?
Yes. And so I spent the weekend and caught the bus out on Monday morning, and I got on the train at 9 o'clock that night and woke up in Jackson, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
The train had stopped for some reason.
Yeah.
And I think we got off it and waited for a while and then got back on, and we went on, and that was on Monday morning, and we got to San Antonio Wednesday at noontime.
It's a long time to be on a train.
And the air conditioner quit, and we had to open up the windows.
Yeah, it was June, so it was
Yeah.
warm.
It was hot.
Man.
And down in Mississippi and Alabama, it was hot down there. And they started barking at us from the time we got off of the train until we got to the barracks, and that was a eye opener.
And you were Elmer at that time.
That's
and
right.
You became Jim somehow, so tell that story real quick.
So I was in the Air Force for 4 years, and the first 2 years I was in school of some sort. First as a combat medic, and then the next school I chose, since I did very well in the combat medic course, I got to choose what schools were open in the medical field, and the laboratory had the longest school, so I chose the laboratory technician school, and it was a two-stage school. 16 weeks was for the basic classroom, learning how to use pipettes and things in the laboratory, and then there was a 32-week after that that you were on the job and doing classes at the same time. It was a second stage school that got you to the point that you could actually be a medical technician. And in that second stage of training, I went in, I was transferred in the laboratory from one section to the other, and the one, I think it was from hematology, I was moved to bacteriology, and when I moved to bacteriology, I replaced a guy who was named Jim. And everybody in the laboratory, he left one day and I replaced him the next day. They just called me Jim. And I actually went through that training with 4 other guys, and those guys started calling me Jim also, and I was with them virtually the rest of the time I was in the Air Force. And it just stuck. That's that story, and I'm sticking with it.
All right. And you still have gone by Jim
For
almost all your life, in
right.
almost every scenario, and only people who knew you as a kid refer to you as Elmer.
That's right.
All right. I'm going to stop the video.